Some ideas, they shake you out of your sleep like when a toddler creeps. Totality of the deep, the mere thought of an unconscious manifestation carried out with the beat. Positive charged protons creating neural explosions. Time hiccups when fingers and pads touch. Dead air smiles because it knows what's coming. The counting is of the clock claps hands. The choreography of the knot slaps jams. And you be like, who made this? Vertebrae responding to the call so bad to make a B-girl curve the wall. To the SP1200, the blue light bulb. To the board, the engineer's hands, and the limited well of patience. Hallelujah to everybody say ho. Amen to all the ladies say ow. Thank God for make money, money, make money, money. And bless every hand that was ever put in the air. In your name, we pray. Let's take you on a time jump, virtual zoom, bringing it back to Theodore's bedroom. These hands are passionately polysyllabic, putting the Jeopardy theme on swings. 10 dons giving predictions, balancing vibes like the sons and daughters of Ipwan. Ear to the underground, flicking off peppermint, fresh experiment. Let's go, El Premier Elemento. You gotta take your time, press your fingers to the line. Red man, focus your mind. And once you do that, you're at the front of the combine.
What's going on, family? It's yours truly, Mazi Mutafa, and I'm really excited about this conversation we're about to have. I'm blessed to be here with two of my personal inspirations, and my history with each of them goes back quite some time. The very first festival that was hosted at the University of Maryland, the Words Beats and Life Festival, our first guest, Mr. Davey D, was a part of a tour that was happening around the country with our good friend Rosa Clemente and the members of Dead Prez. And so they came. It's actually my first time meeting him. To learn more about his work and to talk about the power of journalism and telling the stories of what was happening in the streets through the music, but also through the written word. So first up, I've got my good friend, Mr. Davey D.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us, good brother.
What's up, everybody in the audience?
And not to be, we're saving the second for the second. We've got our good friend, Jeff Chang, got the knowledge, the edited volume.
The elder statesman.
No doubt.
My big brother.
Here with us to talk about some of the work that he's been doing for quite a long time. And we're going to get into some of the personal stories. Mr. Jeff Chang.
Hey. What's up? It's good to see you, Mazi. Man, been a long time, but it's good to see you.
No doubt. And I forgot to mention, Jeff Chang was actually was instrumental in helping me put together our West Coast teach-in, which Davey D was also at, dropping the knowledge from the audience and from the stage about the history of West Coast hip-hop. We've also been fortunate enough to publish both of these gentlemen in our journal.
Yes.
As you know, we're doing something a little different this go-round, which is instead of just interviewing you all to talk about the work that you do, I really wanted to invite you all here as a part of the inaugural alternative winter break, which is inspired by a spring break that we normally host, specifically focused around visual arts and performing arts. And so we decided to do an alternative winter break focused around the media arts. So we're interviewing podcasters, bloggers, journalists, authors, etc., to really talk about how it is that you became the people that you are. Ideally to inspire young people all across the world to chase their dreams, to tell their stories, and to root their work in the communities that they're from. And so to that end, I've started all these conversations off the same way, asking about family, which is something we rarely get asked about. But I wanted to know, for each of you, how much knowledge do you have about your own families? How many generations back can you trace your own lineage?
Mm-hmm.
You want to go first, Jeff?
No, you're my older brother, so you should go first.
No. We already established that.
Yeah, I defer to my elders, brother.
It's a long running joke we have, Mazi, about each other, but Let me just start. We can trace our family lineage back quite a bit. Before Roots came out in the 70s, my uncle wanted to find out the history of our family. And he traced it back, and saw where there was, lineage in indigenous communities. He traced it back to certain parts of Africa, and he came up with um, what is the word I'm looking for? A tree, a family tree that we were able to look at and kind of see. So there's knowledge. I don't have everything completely memorized, but definitely I was fortunate enough to um, know my grandparents, know my great grandparents, and know my great great grandparents before that. Many of the people on my mother's side lived to be, I think we had an Aunt Ella who lived to be 110, and so she died in the 70s. So you do the math. So you're talking about somebody who was born in the 1800s.
Wow.
My grandma passed at 94, 95. And so years old. And so that might have been about 10 years ago. So I just remember her recounting stories of being in Harlem and dancing at the Savoy Manor and all those types of things. So the history is rich on my mother's side. It's in Philadelphia, that there's a big part of it. New York, where we're from. It wasn't so much. I don't think there was a lot of people that we saw the lineage going down south. Is on my father's side. We saw that lineage in South Carolina and Atlanta. So there were big, in Georgia. So there's a big part of it on my father's side in Georgia and in South Carolina. So that's how we kind of trace that back. And I don't have it going back as far as I do on my mother's side, but I did know my grandparents and great grandparents on that side as well.
I love this question, Mazi. And I mean, Dave, I didn't know that. I didn't know that stuff about you. That's amazing. Makes
Oh.
I have so many questions for you now. Just on that.
Yeah.
It's amazing stuff. Yeah, it's a beautiful question, Mazi. My family, I hail from Honolulu, Hawaii. So I come from Chinese and Native Hawaiian descent. So on the Native Hawaiian side, we've been there for thousands of years in the islands, and then on my Chinese side, we've been in the islands for at least 7 generations. Um, that I've got traced, and then I was lucky enough to know this person I met in college. He introduced himself to me as my uncle, and he had literally the family books. In China, you can trace your lineage. They try to trace the lineage back to the emperors, and so he had access to the books and literally gave us a lineage that went back thousands of years, and that just blew my mind. So I've been really blessed to be able to have that sense of deep rootedness, both in the land, the Aina that I grew up on in Hawaii, and to know about my roots going back to Chinese soil. So it's something that we pass on to our kids, and something that Dave and I both have this really strong sense of family and passing on, and that's partly, I think, why we do the work that we do.
I would agree.
I wonder, to bring it more current, could you all share the stories of your parents, what they did, how they met, where they were from, that kind of stuff.
So when it comes to parents, I come of the age where most parents were divorced, and so when I'm talking about my father in the first part, we're talking about my biological father. When we talk about father, then we're talking about my stepfather, who was with me, when I was about 4 or 5. And so when you start looking at it from that lens, you understand that, growing up in New York, you have a lot of relatives who ain't blood relatives. You have a lot of aunts and uncles who aren't really blood aunts and uncles, but they are part of the family. And the lore and the customs and traditions are embedded in what you have. So, I have I have my mom, and then I have my quote unquote stepfather, which means that I have, 3 siblings that would be umbrellaed under that. My sister and it was a stepsister and stepbrother. Um, my stepfather was a Russian Jew. So that's a whole other twist in it, but it wasn't a practicing Russian Jew. You would have probably thought he was Puerto Rican if you saw him. So there's a whole history with that, and, born and raised in the Bronx, and, just a rough and tumble guy. So I came up in a household with that, with that whole history. And even with that, there's a sharing of history and memories and traditions and things that you take on. So, that's kind of how that works for me. When I think about the extended uncles and God family, then it becomes really, really rich. And it expands with, my godmother, who was good friends with Malcolm X, and would take those stories and sit me down and be like, when me and Malcolm were sitting here on 148th, not bragging, because they were really tight, I would hear those stories. And her ex-husband was somebody who was into music. So he was doing a whole music book, breaking stuff down, because at that time, we're talking about the 70s, he felt like that history wasn't there. So the point that I'm getting is that I've always been around family members who were like emphasizing that it's important to pass the history along, because your history, whether you're Black, your history, whether you're from New York or living in the Bronx or what have you, those stories ain't being told. And so I've always had people around me that told those stories and expected us to pass them along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely have a lot in common in that. In Hawaii, we call it hanai, like you're adopted. Like you have your cousins, and you have what they call your calabash cousins.
Yeah.
And it's really like this community that goes back generations. And that's the whole thing. Like in Hawaii, the thing was like, if you did something on a Saturday night, they'd know on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Everybody would know. So that was actually difficult when I started tagging and becoming a little graffiti, kid or whatever. And my mom worked for the police department, but that's a whole other story. So, but yeah, just to say, my parents, my dad, my dad grew up in the city. He grew up on the city side of the island. My mom grew up on the countryside of the island. My dad grew up in one house with like 15 people in it at different points, in like a 1-bedroom house. And then they, after the war, had a little soda business, and did well enough to be able to move to the top of the hill. So that's how they kind of grew up, him and his 6 siblings. And then my mom grew up on the countryside of the island, and my grandparents were farmers. My mom ended up growing up in a little town on the windward side, and they met, and kind of the rest is history. We came along a little bit later, but yeah, these are the kinds of things I love, these questions, because these are the kinds of things that really shape us. And having that responsibility to be able to hold those stories, to be able to pass it on to all our cousins, to all my nieces and nephews, like the dozens upon dozens of them, and then the Calabash nieces and nephews, and the dozens upon dozens upon dozens of those, is something that I share with Dave.
Yeah. In terms of keeping stories, my family broke up when I was about 13 or 14. And one of the things that my mom said is to keep a journal, and she said, keep a journal, because one day you're going to need it, and it's going to be the thing that holds you together. And she encouraged me to keep it very descriptive and, literally just capture the moments. So for me, all that knowledge and understanding what was going on with my family, um, just had me, writing in very great detail, some of which you've seen, about what was going on at particular points in time. So for me, that point in time, and this comes to your, the extended family. People often say, you hear the saying, hip hop was my family. It really was. That was for me an extended parent, an extended uncle, the community around that in the 70s, very magical. And something when I look back on my journals, even though I wasn't, I didn't have the wherewithal at such a young age to be like, I'm writing to chronicle hip hop, You just wrote what was going on, but you're writing your experiences. Oh, I'm at this party. These people are dancing a certain way. I'm seeing this, I'm on the subway. So capturing all that flavor in that moment was important because, years later, first of all, you forget about it. And then you go back and you read and go, oh, yeah, that's what we did. That's what it was. That's how we said it. And those were the things that took place. And so one of the things, we talk about, your family, but the culture in the neighborhoods, especially in a place like New York, that becomes an important part of your upbringing and your shaping. The older kids on your block become de facto older brothers and older cousins. And so,
you're jumping ahead.
well,
You're literally on my fifth question right now.
but it all,
questions, bro.
well, it all morphs together, though.
Let's back just a little. I want to pull it back just a little because I want to ask if either of you remember your earliest recollection of doing something creative. Each of you are artists in addition to being journalists. Your earliest recollection of doing something creative.
So my earliest recollection are twofold. I would write the titles down to my dreams. I'd have these vivid dreams and then I would title them. And then I attempted, and I still have those manuscripts from 7 and 8 years old. I wanted to write a book that talked about superheroes that I had made up, and one of them was the war between Sus and Crone, and there was a hero named Red Star and his brother. I'm gonna remember his brother's name, but I used to make Christmas cards with those superheroes on there. And I've actually still to this day have the books where I tried to write the stories and was like, one day I'm going to write a book, with these things, never got around to it, but they're still there. So maybe my kids will pick them up and do it. But that would probably be the earliest creations of actually just penning something and then trying to draw that.
Yeah. My dad would bring home like these big stacks of computer paper when they used to be like really wide and they'd be folded together and all that kind of stuff. You'd have to feed it into the machine. That's how old I am, but I'm not as old as Dave is. But the thing is like with these papers, you just had like these rolls of the paper. And so just like Dave, I used to make up superheroes and draw them. And you would literally fold it over and there'd be another page and you'd fold it over so you could make these stories, mess around with doing a little bit of, stick figure animation, go like that with it, flip it through and stuff. So those are the kinds of things I think I was getting into really young. And then I remember we used to love radio, listen just to radio.
Yeah.
Me and my friends would come together and we'd like write down our top 5, top 10, top 20 songs each week. And then I would just compile them and we made a magazine out of it. We passed it around the classroom and stuff like that on the under when the teacher wasn't looking. So those magazines that we had started, that was probably 4th grade, were like radio song lists and comics and stories that people would write on binder paper. And that was like the beginning of journalism for me, actually.
I wonder, did you all know that about each other, that as children you all made lists of things?
Nah.
Well, I did.
I didn't know what you did. Dave.
I mean, I read about it when I was growing up about what Jeff was doing, so that's how I was able to find out these stories. No,
True
I
story
didn't.
though. I had Dave, like in college. This is when we met in college, and maybe I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but Dave was and still is one of the biggest, most important DJs and hip hop chroniclers and journalists, pioneering in the Bay. And he used to have a radio show at night that sometimes I go over and see. But he used to compile like these lists of hip hop records weekly and put it up at the local record store. And so I'd be going down there every week and being like, "What's on Dave's list this week, man? What do I have money to buy?" See, like Dave's like he's gonna pull out one of these lists now, because these things were like the list that everybody in the Bay Area used to pick out to actually. They'd all tune into Dave's show, and they'd all go into Leopold's, the record store, on the
So
weekend and find.
these were them. They eventually became the KML Beat Report and the Bay Area Beat Report, but these were these little newsletters that I would do. There's a whole book of them. So this one was when I actually, this would have been a typical one that we did.
Yep, and those are the ways that we found out about like all the new records that were coming out, local artists as well as artists in New York and LA and Texas and everything, and DC. And so that was the bomb.
Wow. So I'm gonna have to pull y'all back just a little bit, because y'all
Sure.
over high school you're all right, because I wanted to know. Hopefully my Wi-Fi looks like it's acting up. All right,
Okay.
so it looks like my Wi-Fi is back. So I wanted to know, when back in elementary, maybe moving into middle school, are there adults, are there family members who are encouraging this work that you all are beginning to create, this process that you all are beginning to develop? Are there adults that are around you that see something, or even older relatives or younger relatives who see something and encourage it? Do you remember maybe someone from your childhood who did that?
Oh, Dave, you muted. There you go.
My mom was the biggest encourager. You know, she was the one that was like, write down, take hold and pursue what you are doing. My godmother, my Aunt Avilia, who taught me tennis and was the one that was like, took me down to 125th Street and well, actually didn't take me down, gave me, my Malcolm X records, right? Which I use a lot in my work. And I have all those original records sitting up on my wall as we speak. Gave me, this Dr. King record where he talks about Black Power and the power of Black radio, all this rare stuff. So she was the one that was like, yeah, you should have this and you should listen to that and you should have these things. So, and she was also very encouraging as well. So there were definitely elders in the community that were around that pushed and wanted us to be the best that we could possibly be. And there were others, but I wouldn't want to name drop like that. But there were some pretty significant folks in our community that I think played a role in kind of not just with me but with everybody around us to really step up and go further. And I just want to emphasize that because I think a lot of times we talk about the hood and it's often depicted in a deficit, and we often forget that within the hood there's a lot of brilliance there, and there's a lot of folks that kick you game, and game is more than just standing on a street corner and hustling, but game is how do you navigate the situations that you're in. Coming up, it was very racially charged. There was a lot of hatred for us, and so understanding Blackness, understanding culture, understanding how to engage folks was important, in having a sense of a very confident sense of where we come from was paramount, and I think was instilled in us as a matter of survival and as a matter of just, this is what we do.
Yeah. First, a shout out to Dr. Hicks Harper. Good to see you on the cast. Yeah, I was blessed as well with many teachers who kind of looked out after me and kind of recognize, oh, he likes to write, he likes to draw, and kind of encourage that. So I had a lot of art teachers, including one of my favorite teachers, Dixie Tamanaha, who's still around. Actually, we reconnected and had a great influence on me. And and then family, just like Dave, like lots of family, lots of elders, lots of folks around. I had a cousin who was just big into collecting records. He ended up becoming a DJ and a radio DJ himself. And I couldn't wait to go to his house, every week, because I could just play all the latest records. He had gotten all the latest records, have some of the first rap records and some of the first, punk rock records and all those kinds of things. And he was like a musical education for me. But yeah, definitely, like it's those networks of folks who look out after you and help you to kind of show you what the paths are that you might be able to take.
David, do you remember when you first began to DJ?
Well, when I first began to DJ, probably was when I moved out to California. I started out as an MC, and if my DJing, if anything, with more pause button tapes. So if you want to ask when I made my first pause button tape, it probably had to be the year that To Be Real, Cheryl Lynn's record came out, because that was the first record that I pause buttoned.
Yeah, was that in the 19th century or the 20th century?
That was 1978, my brother.
Okay, right. You were like 25 then, or something, right?
Something like that, minus 15. So there you go. But no, it was pause button tapes, and by then, I was trying to collect, these records, because by 78 we were hearing and we were seeing this thing called hip hop, and certainly I wasn't going to go into the house and take my father's turntable and cannibalize that. I wouldn't be here if I had done that. But he did allow me to use the tape recorder to play. So Cheryl Lynn's To Be Real, Kraftwerk, Trans Europe Express. What was the other record that we had? Yellow Magic Orchestra. Those are some of the early ones that I remember pause buttoning, and I still have those tapes, believe it or not. And the reason why I did that wasn't because I was trying to DJ. I did that so when I could practice rhyming over it, and that's why I started out, was more as an MC. And the original name was MCDC. And at the time, people said, you don't want to call yourself MCDC, So we changed it to Davey D eventually. But the first rhymes in my rhyme books, which I still have, it's MCDC, and then it was later Bronx Prince, Davey D.
I'm so glad that I'm not on camera while these stories are being told, because I'm over here cracking up with the stories. So you talked about meeting in college. Can we come up to that point? Like, where'd you all go? What'd you study? Etc.
We went to the greatest university on the face of the earth, which was UC Berkeley, Cal Berkeley. We went there at a transformative time. We were there in the middle of the apartheid divestment movement. Definitely was a part of that. We were there when they had shanty towns. People talk about the Occupy, thing, but we saw Occupy before it was Occupy, when people built shanty towns up on Sproul Hall. We were there when Pedro Noguera was making history, and and being elected as first black president. And it was a brother from, what was it, Ghana, that was doing big things. He unfortunately passed. But we were there at a magical time. There was a lot of folks that came out of Cal, that either bled over into our years or were just coming out. So Ricky Vincent was coming out. He was ahead of us. The late Natty Prep, comes out of there. Then later you had Benny B from ABB Records is in our class, and Tafari, and there's a whole lot of folks that are coming out, at that time. And so Cal was a big thing when we were there. And, we were part of forming a party, which I think still exists there, called Cal Serve. I picked the green color, the green neon color. I don't know if they still have it, but
you picked it?
I picked it.
That's not the story I heard, but I'll go with it.
I will. I definitely picked that green neon color.
Still using it, yeah.
I most definitely did.
Parties in college, and we were the progressive party.
Yeah, we were the progressive party. So,
yeah, we were. I mean,
and one thing, since because Mazi's in DC.
Yep.
I was going to go to Howard, and the only reason why I didn't go to Howard was twofold. There were two reasons. One, they wanted $5,000 after financial aid. And at the time I was not 18, right? My mom was still my legal guardian. She had already moved out here, and she was like, "You're not going to go to Howard. You're going to go to UC Berkeley," which at the time was $200 a semester.
Yeah.
It was something like that. It was like $200 a semester.
Cheap, yeah.
It's like, why would you go to Howard and pay $5,000 when you can go right here and, and pay $200? And it's like, well, Mom, I think I want to go here. And then she exercised, well, I'm still, your legal, guardian. I'm, so you're going to go to Cal. So I was forced to go to Cal, and it became the greatest university ever.
It became the greatest university ever. I caught that, Dave. Yeah, no, it was great. Like, we were there at a time. I actually don't know how Dave and I graduated, because between us doing our activism during the day and then doing radio at night, like, I don't know when we got our work done. But we did, and it was a pretty amazing time. We, there was so much stuff that kind of happened, and it wasn't the kind of thing where there was a lot of, I mean, it was an era where it was really conservative. So, we were the resistance and the opposition, and it wasn't a time where there was a lot of people in the beginning who were parts of these social movements like there is now, where you have 25 million people in the streets. We were building that, and so it was amazing for us to be able to see that happening, where one day you got a rally of a couple hundred people fighting against apartheid, and then the next day there's like 10,000 people out there, and you know that you're a part of something that's bigger, and also like radio, like for real, like people like Natty Prep, people like Dave. I was on the same radio station, but I live down here in South Berkeley, where I do now, and literally like on the weekends, and I don't play, like, more people were listening to Calex and Black radio in the neighborhood that I lived in than were listening to any of the mainstream radio stations. So that was like the network. And so when Dave got up and played like a Malcolm X record with like a hip hop record underneath it, like literally everybody up and down the block was listening to it. And it was just a powerful feeling. And knowing that was kind of getting transmitted at that time, and we were building that.
But that was the whole build, that came out of Natty Prep, that came out of CJ Flash. Big shout out to him, So and to get those shows, just to contextualize, we're in school during the Reagan era, right? And people need to understand that Reagan is looked at as this fuddy-duddy, wholesome, the Gipper, almost like some grandfatherly type of figure. Reagan was a beast.
Yeah.
and he was somebody who I have a visceral reaction to. Reagan was somebody who was talking about people being redrafted. Remember, we had to fill out the selective service cards,
Yeah.
and Reagan and the Reagan, the Reagan era, which I think we still feel the footprints of, was very palatable. It was during that time you started to see the fights to end affirmative action. We're starting to see all those changes early on under that president. So, we sometimes we look back nostalgically, and and there is a lot of nostalgia, but I also look back and remember that dude that sat in the White House, Ronald Wilson Reagan, was a real devil, and you can quote me on that. He was somebody who was not your friend. He was somebody who he was very bad if you were black. He was very bad if you were a person of color, as far as I'm concerned. And I think KRS summed it up in his song, Yeah.
I'm curious, is a lot of the discussion has been about the things that you all did outside of the classroom. Were there professors or courses that you all were taking, books you got introduced to in college that helped to shape the activism that you all were doing in the streets, the music you were presenting to your audiences?
There were great professors there. I had Harry Edwards as a professor, right? Big debate with Harry Edwards in the class about Frances Cress Welsing, who I was turned on, and he didn't agree with her theory, and I had to argue that, and we had a big debate for about 45 minutes. I got an A in the class, so that was good.
Just so y'all know, Harry Edwards is Colin Kaepernick's mentor.
He was, yeah. I don't know if they were, yeah.
Yeah.
But so you had Harry Edwards. The one that really was the transformative person on that campus was a professor named Roy Thomas. Mm-hmm. Roy Thomas was the saving grace for a lot of black students that were there. So big shout out to Professor Thomas. That's one of the reasons in the book I dedicated that, because he was the one that encouraged and was like, hey man, you should one day write, and and he did that with Ricky Vincent and a bunch of other people. He was that black figure on the campus that would make sure that things were good. There was a bunch of people, names I don't always remember, that were supporting folks. There was a guy, I'm going to remember, his name was Muwaga from the African People's Party or something like that. He was a powerful figure that you always saw on the campus, and would be one of those people that would, lace you with cultural game. But, Roy Thomas was probably most important professor on that campus as far as I was concerned when I was going to school there. And we also had Ron Takagi, was another towering figure, right? Ron Takagi, what is it? Iron Claws? What was the name of the book?
Iron Cages.
Iron Cages, yeah. So
yeah.
So we had some folks up there.
Folks, man. In my freshman year, I took an Asian American Studies class, and we read the autobiography of Malcolm X in our Asian American Studies class. And that just turned my whole thing around. Like, I came in, I was going to go into business. I was going to do this. I was going to do that. And that very first class introduced me up to a whole new world. And that was about the same time I think that I might have met Dave. That was my freshman year. And started doing the radio station. So, it was all kind of together. Like, you'd read some of these books, the autobiography of Malcolm X. You'd read what were some of the other big books at the time? We would read Martin Luther King. We would read all these different types of things. And then we would go on to the radio station, and we had this radio show called Amandla, where we talked about what was going on in South Africa and what was going on in Oakland. Like right now, what's going on in Oakland, Dave, man? You got all the sirens going on back there.
I know. I'm looking there. All the, I have a window that looks out on the freeway, and all the traffic is stopped.
Oh,
So that's what, yeah. So I'm seeing
wow.
police cars and about, yeah, I think that's probably the fourth fire engine that just rolled by. So I don't know what's going on here.
It was always something going on in Oakland.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was that was the thing is we learned a lot about community in our classes, and then we got to practice that like on the campus and in the community and on the radio. So that was it was all kind of an education. All of that kind of flowed together for us.
Yeah.
And the follow up question to that is: did your journalism start while you were in college, or did that happen afterwards? The need to tell the stories of what was happening in your communities. When did that start?
My journalism happened by accident. I often tell people, and this is very true, I don't like writing. I really don't. Um,
You should have told
and
me do that before we did this book together, man.
I know, but
Take me throughout
it's
the
like,
time.
I try to write quickly to get it done and keep it moving. But I'm not, I don't, I'm not,
Writing's fucking hard. Oh, excuse me. Writing is hard, man. Writing is
right.
really difficult. Yeah.
But the way that it started for me was when I got the show on Calix, and to get a show up at that station were hard fought pitch battles, especially if you were black. There was no love for us to play black music on that station. The show that that I came out of was started by a guy named Natty Prep, who had to go to the California state legislature and fight to get a spot, that 3-hour block on Sunday mornings that started out as called Music for the People. And then he brought everybody in, and it also had to be that he was a rough and tumble guy, and there was another guy that was there that literally had to the story goes, they had to pull guns, like, we're not leaving this station, right? And so that's how those shows got established. They were not given to us. They were not, handed over. These were things that people fought for those spaces, and they became cultural zones. I was probably coming out of that show, was able to break into, out of that little 3-hour block because of a guy named Billy Jam, who did some very, innovative stuff so that I would be approved. Which was he invited me as a guest on his show and then didn't show up, which meant that I had to man the board, and which meant that I got approved of a prime time time slot. So I wound up getting an evening slot, and it was when I got that evening slot, which was the first time that had happened for black folks ever. I decided, instead of writing and started making a flyer, why don't I do a record chart? And that record chart would also include me writing about some of the songs that I was playing, and would put them in the record stores. And that garnered a lot of response. And then the journalism kind of kicks in this way. The station had a stamp machine, and what I would do is I would go in there early or on the weekends, and I would fill up, would stuff these envelopes with these playlists. And whenever I saw anybody, I would take their address. Can I get your address? And I would mail them this playlist. So, I mean, we had a big list of maybe about 500-600 people. And the way I would get people's addresses, I would look on the back of the records, and I'd be like, oh, let's write to this company. Let's write to that company. One of the people who I wrote to was a gentleman by the name of Carlton Ridenauer, better known as Chuck D. And he hit me back and started a friendship. And Chuck was probably the one to really encourage me on a journalism tip to really stick with the writing in ways that I have today. It was like, that's how I met him. It was because he got this newsletter with colored paper and a black envelope, with their song on it and me writing about the song. And he really stayed on me to do that. At the same time, he's also staying on another guy by the name of Harry Allen to also continue in that path. So there was that encouragement, but the writing opened up doors. It's how I got my radio career in media, was because I had a writing I had something tangible that people could look at. And those newsletters were real godsends. They filled the void at the time. It allowed me to have conversations in spaces that I normally wouldn't. It it was a way to I wouldn't say curry favors, but people were very appreciative if their songs were on there. So through those newsletters, I met Tone Loc and Young MC. I think because Tone Loc was on there to help get him signed. The folks from Tommy Boy, I met Digital Underground, all these people because of those newsletters, and that's what kind of said, well, you better stick with it, and doors been opening because of it. But it was out of necessity, not out of, I want to be a journalist.
And Dave really influenced me. I started writing I was writing some political stuff. I had a column in a local like Asian American newspaper. I was writing about activist issues, and was also doing some writing for the radio station. They had a newsletter too that they sent out, and I did a story on graffiti in the Bay Area, which was kind of blowing up at the time. It was like the golden moment of Bay Area graffiti, like in the mid '80s, and then did a story on Sway. Sway was like this DJ. Sway and Tech had this show called the Wake Up Show that they were getting started at the time. They had a rap crew as well. So I did a story on them too, and that became my thing into doing a lot more writing. I stuck with the writing though. Dave was doing the radio stuff. I kept on doing radio, but I really branched out and did a lot more writing afterwards. And Dave's right; it's hard. It's a real difficult thing. But it was one of those things where when we wrote, it was a way to be able to build community, and we were finding all the kinds of like minds out there, and like folks that we could do all kinds of work with, and artists, musicians, DJs, just all kinds of folks. And so I ended up like forming a crew, and we put out a bunch of records, and that's the sort of sign you see in the background, Soul Sides. That was one of the things that kind of was an offshoot off of the stuff that I learned watching Dave, and hanging with Dave, and all of the folks who were doing this kind of stuff at the time, and just being inspired by all of the energy that folks had to be able to change the world.
And in the Bay Area, there's a hustle mentality. So I often say born in New York, but raised in the Bay. And what I mean by that is that the Bay Area, if you looked at it as a character, understands a few things. It's 3,000 miles away from New York, so it's not looking to New York for any sort of cues. When I came out here and I was like, I'm from New York, and people be like,
so
I think I have a friend that's from New York. That was a very different response than when you live on the East Coast and you went up and down the coast, and you said you were in New York, and it was like, oh wow, but out here people are like, I think I think I had an uncle that went there one year, so there was no fascination. And LA is the next bigger, big entity, and the Bay is not LA, and it's very, very clear. It's an independent, like we are our own thing. So as a result, the Bay mentality has always been like, you got to do for self, because you're not flying across country 3,000 miles, and you're not trying to be like LA. So you always look at situations and you figure out, how can I flip this? So, the whole thing with the newsletters, the flip, the Bay Area flip would be, I could, walk around and ask people, give my number to people, say, here, my name is Dave, here's my card. But, and you're not thinking like Bay Area stuff. You just be like, how can I flip this? I'm going to take your number, because now I have your address and I can hit you up and I can offer you something, not the other way around. So I'm not going to be sitting at a phone, in front of a phone waiting, with bated breath for a phone call. I can be proactive. And so that sort of mentality of always looking at, how can I get in this door? What's it going to take? Can I go through the back way? Can I go through the other side? Can I go below? Can I bust through the door? And so those are the things that, you know, become part of the DNA out here, which in many ways is an essence of hip hop in a big way. But it's really, you know, to me, refined out here. You know, do for self independently. And I'll just close with this. I didn't have no computer when I was doing those newsletters. So how did we get the newsletter computer? We went to Cal and I asked to borrow the news, you know, a computer, you know, from the library or something. And it was a guy that was working, you know, the thing. And he's like, man, here, you could use this Mac. And, you know, that Mac came to the house and, you know, I did my newsletter there. You know, it was returned eventually, but, you know, it's looking to figure out how you could do it because, you know, I didn't have no money to buy a Macintosh, you know, but we were going to do this newsletter. So it's that understanding. It's like, man, you need a Mac, man. Hold up. Let me go in the back. Hey, you know, nobody's using this Mac up here in the library. You know, just don't tell them you got it for me and, you know, return it, you know, in about 6-7 months. And, you know, so we had that computer. Bay Area hustle.
Bay Area hustle. All that work got done. No doubt.
So we've talked about college, we talked about family, all that good stuff. So as we get ready to wrap up, I wonder how you think that all those experiences catapulted you into the literary, the lecture, the media careers that each of you has built. How do you feel like those things set you up to be able to do the kind of work that you do today, whether that's political, whether that's historical, academic? How do you feel like all those things help to make you who it is that you are today?
Jeff, you go.
I mean, just to build on what you were talking about, Dave, like it's that sense of independence and hustle and integrity, right? Like this, the thing about it is all of this stuff was always done with this idea that we were doing it to try to make things better for our folks, and still are. That's sort of what drives what it is that we do. And so, you know, like all the paths that my parents had figured out for me and that kind of thing, like those kind of went to the wayside as it became clearer and clearer. Oh, actually, I've got some skills in these kinds of things, and I got some interest in these kinds of things, and I'm making a difference. And I think that that's something that kind of ended up pushing me. But you know, the here we are now, right? We're here all these years later. Dave's still older than me, but we're like old friends. And the reason that we've stayed so tight over the years is that we have the same kind of idea about what it is that we want to do, and we came through the same kind of circumstances together. You know, we went through the fire together, and so that's what I would really want to say to all the folks who are coming up is, you know, find your folks, and then when you get with them, like you're sticking with them, because these are the folks that you'll be with, you know, for life, and for, you know, for all the things that you're going to be doing together, for all the people that you're going to be doing it together for. And you, like Dave lifts me up, you know, sometimes I lift him up, but he's kind of heavy. So it's not hard. I need some help sometimes. But we look out for each other, you know, and that's, I think, what it's all about. Like I feel honestly like really privileged to have been able to meet this dude when I was like a wee child and needing somebody to look up to, and feel like blessed to be able to still be down now.
So I appreciate that. Let me just say this, Mazi, and for people listening, it's about accountability as well. And you know, I tell the joke about somebody got me a computer. Well, don't waste my time. You know, if I get you this computer, man, you got to produce.
Yeah, make it happen.
You know, you got to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, we're taking a chance on you. We're making an investment in you. you know, if Billy Jam kicked down the door so I could do that primetime show, man, don't be, first of all, don't mess up on my airwaves because I'm not supposed to have you be there. So come with your A game and then, you know, continue to shine. If you're doing it on your own and you're coming out of that nexus with folks who literally had to fight, you know, physically and legislatively to get a show, you cannot be the person that screws up. You can't be that guy because, first of all, you're going to see these folks and you don't want to disappoint them. And some people ain't going to take too kindly because, like, dude, you know, there's a lot of people that want to do what you're doing. How dare you screw up on our behalf? And the point that I'm making is that, you know, none of us are islands on our own. We are the culmination of people who saw the best in us and brought out the best in us and, you know, expected us to bring our A game at every turn. So there was an accountability line, not just with family. There's an accountability line with friends and community folks. There was an accountability line with my church. You know, there was an accountability line of, you know, maybe it might have been an Alex Mejia who brought me, Sway, and Tech and everybody up to KMEL, you know, when we started doing commercial radio. How dare any of us, you know, slip up and make them look bad? It's kind of like the shout out, you know, when you acknowledge the people that push you, they want to be able to say, yeah, that's my dude. You know, I'm proud of what he did. You don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, shout out to Jeff. And they're like, that's your man over there? That's your homeboy? The dude that has scandal attached to him, the one that does subpar work, the guy who, you know, every time you turn around is an embarrassment. And so I think you have a certain amount of pride. You want to show up and show out, you know, for your people, not in an egotistical way, but because you represent them. And, you know, there was always a promise with the communities that I wrote with, like, I'm not going to make you look bad, you know, and as you get older and, you know, you have married, you know, now I'm married and I have kids, you know, you don't want to walk in the house and have your wife and kids look at you and be like, is that your dad? No, you don't ever want to fall down. And what I mean by falling down, we're not talking about, oh, you're unemployed or you don't have money in the bank or anything like that, because those are things that we don't always have control over. We're talking about, do you have the integrity? You know, are you giving it, you know, your 100%? Are you something that people can be proud of? Or are you an embarrassment, you know, in terms of what you do? You don't want to go out like no sucker at the end of the day. And so I think, you know, I'm a product of New York, the Bronx, and I'm a product of Oakland, California. I don't want to let either one of those communities down because there are people in both places, and especially here, that would hold you accountable. You don't want to see those folks and be like, man, you know, you made us look bad. I don't want to be that guy. Somebody else can hold that mantle. We're going to continue the legacy of excellence that came before us and invest in people coming behind us so that they can continue with that as well.
That was the official mic drop comment of the whole talk. Thank you so much, guys. Like, I got to step my game up. I gotta do better. I got to do better. No. Not just because, you know, because of what you said, but because, like you said, there's so many people that have done so much to make whatever it is we're doing possible. So all of us, regardless of how good or not so good we're doing, we can still do better. We can still do more. I want to thank you both for spending this hour with us.
Thank you.
So much about each of you. Thank you so much for your time, for your generosity of spirit. If you're just tuning in, it's actually going to be archived. You can check it out on YouTube, on Facebook. And yeah, this was amazing. Thank you so much for being a part of the inaugural Words, Beats, and Life Alternative Winter Break. We're going to close out with a couple of commercials. But thank you so much, everybody. Peace.
God bless the cipher, the rotation. God bless the beatboxer's lungs. Amen for breath control. The smiles that pry open faces and flow goes unbroken. And the smoke. To stories you can see, to coming in on the one. Picture this. Underneath the margins, your words can breathe. Got your listeners tilting isosceles the way you holding volcanic quills, spitting decrees. Better believe it flows like these. You got gills, screaming at daffodils or dreaming in mandrills, derivative of skills. You're built in the workshop, rocking with Ra. Cause in life, the woodshed don't stop. It don't stop. It don't stop. Don't stop.